Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to do a breakdown of my song Battle Under a Dying Star. So the whole song started as a parody of this sad hamster meme that was popular about a year ago. And I wanted to make it in some sort of cool orchestral version. And that resulted in this project file. Check that out here. And I thought it was cool, and then I sped it up, and then I thought it sounded cool. All of those instruments are still here, such as if I take out the piano, you can hear the... I changed the melody of the meme slightly, but I made it much faster, and then I added drums, and then I turned it into a whole song, because I thought it sounded really cool. So I'll start with the whole song now, just from the very beginning. So the very beginning is in this kind of more chill section, more ambient. With I really like the flautando from Spitfire Chamber Strings, and I kind of just made a chord of it with some viola flautando, and then there's a pad in the background. I think that's it for the very beginning. There's some timpani to give it some accents. That's all the first 20 seconds or so happens. And then what it does is it kind of climbs up this melody. And then all of a sudden, it kind of modulates very briefly to the chord that is a half step below the tonic. So this song is in A minor. It goes for like a bar to G sharp minor, which is kind of a jarring change. I thought it was cool. But then it modulates from G sharp minor to E major, which is the dominant, so that it goes right back to A minor. And it's kind of this cool effect. So it's and then it just goes right back to the key you were at the beginning, but you have this like weird, cool little dissonant part here. The strings are very important. So I do this thing all the time whenever I first realized I could do it, where instead of just having like sustained notes playing a chord, they are kind of like arpeggios. But if you use Cinematic Studio strings and then layer it maybe with other libraries, I didn't do that here, but it sounds very realistic actually. And it's a way that you can incorporate some movement into the background of the track instead of just playing, instead of something like this, like I did here. It sounds much cooler, I think. And I do this all the time. I love doing this. And then I add the full string ensemble. These are really cool. You might say, well, you already have violas here. Why do you have them again here? Because I don't really care. It sounds really cool. Also, these are very, very quiet, but you can hear them because the frequencies pierce. They're so high. You can kind of hear them even in the hole. They're very powerful. And then this is one big, it's a very commonly used chord progression. It's just like 1, 7, 6, 5. You go down like stepways. That's all the bass does. That's all it does. It's very simple. And then if you just follow, the chords. And then I think it just repeats. There's also a choir here, which I think is really cool. It gets added right here. And then it kind of accentuates this very short modulation because you go, this is an A, and then it leads right to that G sharp minor. These mallets, I think, are a little too loud. Every time I listen to the original song, I wish I made them a little quieter, but it is what it is. And then I always add a sub, even if I have a bass. I try to mix it so that the bass and the sub don't clash. There's a timpani roll that I rendered out so that it could be made a little bit quieter. And then this is mostly just strings, the choir, some horns, this little snare guy to make it a little more military sounding. These drums, which are from Damage 2, and then they get much beefier. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about mixing. So I like to do an instance of contact per instrument. I know some people like to have one instrument or like lots of MIDI out routed to one contact. That's fine, but I like the flexibility of having multiple mixer tracks. So all of these pretty much just go straight to this strings channel where I probably remove the low end and they get taken off. There's a little bit of there's a lot of OTT, and then also Gullfoss, which I use a lot, and then lots of reverb. And the reverb in this track is just the Concert Hall ALA preset from FabFilter Pro R. This is pretty loud. And there's also no EQ, no nothing on this for some reason. This is not the original choir because I deleted the library I had. But it's pretty close. And you can see how I don't even know what is going on there. And then there are some horns from Cinematic Studio Brass. Very important. Oh, and they are 2 separate legato patches. And they're post-processed. They're just added here. And just a little bit of reverb. I should have removed any low frequencies. I don't know why I didn't. All of the like the melodies of the background instruments kind of have this similar melody. Like all of the background stuff kind of just goes like that. And then you'll have like the main chord progression in this section is something like which is a very simple chord progression. It's very, diatonic, it's used everywhere, it's great. But it's made more interesting if you have something like this, where you'll notice that there are some notes that just carry on for the whole thing. Like here, we have an E here that is basically the whole chord progression long. So it actually sounds something like this, which gives now you're adding notes, which sounds cool. So if you do stuff like that, you take a very basic chord progression and you can add a lot to it, which I think is cool. Especially here, in this section, the choir adds a G, turning this into a minor 7th chord. So the effect of that is, whoa. Kind of like that. So that G here is very important. The dynamics are also very important because this part is a lot quieter than this part because I'm modulating the, I don't know, the modulation of the horns and the choir, and you know, it's getting much louder, like the war drums are getting crazier at the end. And then the sub is there. The sub is very important to make everything feel grounded. When I was making this, I was kind of struggling with making this because this is very like orchestral and very cinematic. It's not very electronic. And then I wanted to take it to this sort of like breakcore thing. So I did the best I could with making that transition. I added an organ that's playing this cool little riff. And I knew I wanted to have some sort of synth. And I kind of just filtered it in, and then I also filtered in the breaks from the drop so that you could get introduced to them pretty subtly. So in the very beginning, it maintains that aesthetic of like, this is an orchestral thing that you might hear in like a movie or something. And then it kind of fades in the stuff over here that's like, okay, this is something you'd hear in like a Geometry Dash song. Hear it in the background. And then it's right there. Same thing with the synth. This is 2 vital patches. I mean, diva patches. One of them sounds like this. One of them sounds like this. Maybe I'll play them. One of them, yeah. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty important to have. And then they mirror the organ. And then they have this little pattern. And then they highlight, these notes highlight a chord, and then I layered that, just those 3 notes, with the mallets. It's a lot of low end. I should have EQ'd. And then it ends. It has this kind of like pre-drop thing with horns that are probably from Cinematic Studio Brass. Yeah. And then they're just French horns. So, okay, let's talk about the drop. So the main thing of the drop is this huge piano thing. It's just the arpeggios for the chord progression of the drop. And then they are spanned 4 octaves. They just get duplicated. And then, after they stop playing, the delay turns on. So there's a... Oh, that's a lot of effects. Okay. So there's a lot of effects here. And then when the piano is not playing, they get turned on. So for everything else, there's like a kind of a stack here of all the bass stuff. The fart bass, this is a very EDM thing. So the fart bass is a saw wave that gets added to a noise, and then it gets distorted. Classic EDM trick. Timpani, sub, the stupid hamster melody, some trombones, bass trombones, tubular bell. So that makes up the like most of the instruments here. There's also bass from the strings, male choir, and then the horns change into this staccato patch that matches the rhythm of the, you know, it's just on every measure or so. The drums are pretty cool. So I'm using Slice X for the loop. It's just an almond loop that I kind of actually just kept here, and then I manipulated the pattern for drum fills. And then I added a kick and a snare on top of it, you know, pretty EDM stuff. And then, you know, sidechain cymbals, stuff. What's this? Orchestral crashes that didn't make it. So that's the drum. So we can talk about the chord progression. It goes 1, and then it goes, I think that's 6. No, that's 7. Let's do this in the piano roll. I'm gonna turn off the piano. I'm gonna pause this while I figure this out. Okay, so let's get this. So it starts on the 1, and then it goes to the 7, and it goes to the 4, and then back to the 1, or sorry, 4, and then to the 3, and then back to the 6. So here it kind of goes, it starts in A minor, and then it kind of goes into the 3, which is like the relative major. So it starts on A minor, and then it kind of is like, okay, maybe we're in C major now. We kind of are like, okay, maybe we're, you know, happy in C major. And then the E major brings us back to the A minor. So it's back to that minor dark sound. And then there's a minor 6, which is a chord I love to use this chord. Instead of using the 5 to the 1, I always use the minor 6 to the 1. So instead of, and this is like, you know, a great example of what that sounds like. So this is 5-1, and then this is minor 6-1. And then it just does 5-1 for the rest of it. So that chord progression just goes with, I didn't like make the chord progression. I made the melody first, and then I kind of just added everything after. But it goes with the melody you hear. This is pretty powerful because this is being chromatically raised, and it sounds really cool because you go from C major, and then G is the 5th in C major, and then it goes to E major, and then G sharp is the 3rd of that. Yes, and then the pattern changes, so now the piano is playing these impossible chord stacks, and then the trumpet is responding. So if I had to summarize everything that is in this drop, I would say that there's, you know, you have the stabs from the brass and the bass, all of this stuff. And then there are elements that are sustained happening in the background, like there's the piano, and then there's the drums. That's kind of all there is in the drop. Okay, moving on. And then this is just the same chord progression, just in a synth. The organ is playing too. There's supposed to be some bells playing, but they did not load in. This is just kind of like the breakdown after the drop. I just basically like moved some stuff from the drop to here. And then you have this chord progression. So this section has the same chord progression as this section. It's just in a much more synthy version. And a lot of people are like, this reminds me of Terraria. Well, the reason is because I basically copy and pasted some of this stuff from Terraria. So a lot of it is from this part of Scourge of the Universe. For example, you have this here. And then there's a drum fill around here. Which I basically just stole and put it here. Oh yeah, it is here. But it got removed. It's not here. Usually in the actual song it goes like and then you're supposed to have some of the drum breaks here. I don't know what happened in this project file. But that's also there. And then the bass follows a similar path. To this. It goes like dun 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 dun. So I copied some of those moves and then I just put them here. Then I copied some of the stuff that was over here and put it over here. There's the strings and the choir. Here's something that changes. Instead of going 1 and then 6, it goes 1, 5. So here we have the A minor. This is technically an A minor 7. And then you hear the G natural. There's no G natural there. Here. Anyway, this chord is a lot different than this chord. And I had to change everything to adjust for that, but it sounds cool. So there's a tiny variation in the pattern here. And then it just continues on like that. And then this is basically like this, except we've already heard the geometry dash part of the song. So I took out the filters that are kind of put there to make it more subtle, so it just kind of goes. And then I changed the drum pattern here. That's change number 1. And I added in. This is an awesome sound. How did I make this? So this is a combination of a few other sounds. So it's this Diva preset. Plus this one. Pretty cool. And then it gets added, so the piano to the piano. And then the mallets take over and they go back down. So we have this kind of contour that goes up and then it goes back down. And then on the second part of it, we add cool patterns to the trumpet's response. that's where it ends. So that's all I can think really to say for it. All of the mixing is basically, you know, you put it in the mixer, you take out the lows, or you're supposed to. Sometimes I forget. Then you do any more EQing, you do compression, and then you add reverb. As for mastering, there is no mastering on this song. I usually don't master. But I think why this song works as well as it does is because you have these cool orchestral elements that sound like they should kind of be in a movie soundtrack, and then you kind of add them to an EDM kind of, you know, drums and have some synths in there, so it kind of becomes this like Geometry Dash or like Osu kind of thing, or like Terraria, but you use the high quality contact instruments to give it a bigger aesthetic, I think. As for music theory, I didn't learn music theory until very recently. You don't need it to make music, but it can inform you about stuff you do. And like, for example, I know that I really love the minor 6 chord. So anytime I want it, I know how to add it, and that's pretty important. Like, I know what that is, and I know why I like it. So I don't have to like rederive it every time I need to add one. And then also I think it allows you to do cooler things because you know what you're doing. Like for example, I would have gotten confused if I tried to do that without knowing, like, okay, I'm in A minor, I'm just gonna put everything one note down, and then I'm gonna modulate it so that it goes back to where we started. So it's a little easier to do symbolically like that than to ear it out, but you can ear it out. And then other lessons, you can take very basic chord progressions and then add notes so that they become cooler. I kind of wanted to see what would happen if there was less piano and the strings were a lot louder, because I kind of made them more quiet because I didn't want people to know that this was like inspired by some meme. So like even louder than that. Okay. I don't like how harsh it's starting each time. I wonder if I can change that. Yeah, that sounds better. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I was always curious to know what that would sound like. But anyways, if there are any questions, I can answer them in the comments. I tried to go through as deeply as I could, or what I think would be interesting about this song. So let me know if there are any more questions, and thanks for watching.